Hello and welcome to Americans Learn. My name is Colin, and today I'm watching Alexander the Great Part 1. And this, of course, is coming to us from Epic History TV. So give them a like, share, and follow, why don't you? And while you're at it, give us a like, share, and a follow. There's my humble request as I stumbled over it to show my humility. But yeah, so we're watching or getting into Alexander the Great today. This is a 4-part series as well, so strap in. And let's see, there's not a ton I can recall off the top of my head about Alexander the Great other than he was Greek, right? I think the legend was that he was either like the son of a god, maybe Zeus or someone, or another god. I think, or maybe his father was like the son of God. I think there was some familial lineage connecting him to one of those gods. Let's see. I think there was maybe some how do I want to phrase this? Some suspicions about his sexuality, I guess, being maybe at least bisexual, something like that. I think they played with that a bit in the movie with Colin Farrell. If I recall, it's been many years since I watched that movie, or learned anything regarding Alexander the Great. It's been a long time, so this would be a nice review. As with pretty much all the videos I watch on Epic History TV, it's a review of stuff that I'm somewhat familiar with, learned a little bit about in my schooling years, but don't. I'm no historian. There's a lot for me to learn and relearn, I guess. So that's the point I'm trying to make. Anywho, with that being said, I already did my like, share, and subscribe spiel, so let's get right into it, shall we? Ba-boom.
In 334 BC, Alexander, king of Macedonia, began one of the greatest military campaigns in history against the superpower of the age, the Persian Empire. Just 20 years old, his brilliant and fearless leadership won him battle after battle.
Damn, 20 years old.
And in an astonishing 10-year campaign that took him to the edge of the known world, he carved out one of the largest empires ever known. Few men have had such a massive impact on the course of history. To the Persians, he was Alexander the Accursed. But to the West, he was immortalized as Alexander the Great. Ancient Greece. From around 500 BC, this rugged land was the scene of remarkable developments in art, philosophy, and warfare. Its two greatest city-states were Athens, a naval power where democracy, art, drama, and philosophy flourished, and Sparta, an austere, militaristic society famed for its formidable army. In 480 BC, these two city-states had joined forces to fight an invasion by the mighty Persian Empire. At the narrow pass of Thermopylae, a small Greek force led by 300 Spartans held up the enormous Persian army for 3 days.
I was about to ask, was it the same Persian-Greek conflict that involved the 300 Spartans? And there you go. My question was answered.
Before they were finally encircled and killed. Then, in the Straits of Salamis, the Greek fleet defeated the Persian navy. But they couldn't prevent the Persians burning the sacred temples of the Athenian Acropolis. The next year at Plataea, the Greeks won a decisive land battle against the Persians and forced them to abandon their invasion. The next 50 years were the golden age of classical Greece. But rising tension between Athens and Sparta and their allies eventually led to war, dragging the Greek world into decades of destructive fighting. Wars between the Greek city-states continued for almost a century, leaving them exhausted and vulnerable to a new rising power to the north.
So were these city-states then, like, seems like they were relatively independent of each other, but they were still, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but they were still under, like, the general banner of Greece? Is that right? Or were they just, like, when you say, like, city-states, again, they seem pretty independent of one another, but do they just have, like, for the most part, general alliances with one another, except for, you know, in this particular conflict where they're fighting each other? Is that how that worked? Again, let me know in the comments.
For centuries, sophisticated Greeks had viewed the mountainous kingdom of Macedonia as a backwater, Hicksville. Barely Greek at all.
Hicksville.
But under King Philip II, Macedonia emerged as a formidable military force. His most famous reform? The introduction of the sarissa, an 18-foot pike, twice the length of a normal Greek spear, and wielded by trained infantry, fighting in close formation, known as a phalanx.
Phalanx, huh?
In 338 BC, at the Battle of Chaeronea, Philip's army crushed the joint forces of Thebes and Athens. Through alliance and conquest, Philip had already gained control over most of his neighbours. Now, following this victory, he united all Greece in an alliance known as the Hellenic League, or League of Corinth, with Philip as hegemon, or supreme commander. Only Sparta stood aside. Philip began to plan a great campaign, a pan-Hellenic or all-Greek war against the Persian Empire. Their old foe was now an ailing superpower, its great riches ripe for the taking. But on the eve of launching his war, Philip was assassinated by his own bodyguard, victim of Macedonia's brutal court rivalries. He was succeeded by his 20-year-old son, Alexander, brilliant, restless, tutored by the great philosopher Aristotle, and already an experienced military commander. Alexander...
I wonder, so earlier when I said that, like, what I recalled about Alexander the Great was that the legend was that he was the son or, like, grandson of a god, I guess. But maybe I was just, like, inflating the status of philosopher as, like, god status, you know? And maybe, who did he say? Aristotle was this?
And already an experienced military commander. Alexander inherited his father's grand plan to invade Persia.
Okay.
But
I think he said Aristotle was his teacher. Which, even so, like, that's pretty impressive, you know? Yeah. I don't remember. I think they probably mentioned that in that movie. I don't recall it being a particularly good movie. I don't know how historically accurate it was. The movie with Colin Farrell. But I feel like there was maybe, at least at the beginning, like a very short cameo that Aristotle made, maybe. I don't remember. I don't know if the movie is worth revisiting to confirm that or not, but Let's keep going.
But first, he had to secure his own position as king. At home, he had potential rivals executed, then crushed rebellions in Illyria, Thessaly, and central Greece. He made a special example of Thebes, completely destroying the ancient city and selling its people into slavery. In the spring of 334 BC, now ready to launch his war against the Persian Empire, Alexander led his army across the Hellespont into Asia Minor. It was the start of one of the greatest military campaigns in history. Alexander's army was about 40,000 strong, drawn from all parts of Greece. The infantry were commanded by the veteran Macedonian general Parmenion. In the front rank, 9,000 Macedonian phalangites, armed with the 18-foot sarissa. These were professional soldiers, well-trained and drilled, who formed up for battle in the phalanx, 16 ranks deep.
I appreciate this level of visuals to be able to show us what it looked like, because in a lot of the Epic History TV playlists that I've watched, they have kind of the map view and little like boxes indicating troops, and those are useful for sure. But I think having an additional visual, something like this, to kind of see how those formations really looked on the like individual basis, but not individual basis, but you know what I mean, where you can see the individuals in the group is what I think is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, to kind of see a representation, a reenactment like this, because yeah, like these are some pretty epic battles that Epic History TV covers, and I think my imagination can only go so far when I'm seeing little boxes moving around a map, and I think seeing it portrayed in this way, in addition to those maps, is useful. So please, Epic History TV, do more a little like this, I guess is what I'm saying. Let's keep going.
This packed formation presented a solid wall of iron spear tips and was virtually unstoppable. But it was also difficult to maneuver and highly vulnerable to attacks on its flanks or rear. So 3,000 elite infantry, the hypaspists, or shield bearers, armed with shorter spears, guarded its flanks. They were commanded by Parmenion's son, Nicanor. The second line of Alexander's army was made up of 7,000 Greek allies and 5,000 mercenaries, armed as hoplites. They took their name from the hoplon, their large round shield, and carried shorter 8-foot spears. A hoplite phalanx was not as effective as the Macedonian phalangites, but still well armed and heavily armoured for the time. The Agrianes were the army's elite skirmishers, expert javelin throwers from what's now southern Bulgaria. Other skirmishers from Thrace and Illyria were armed with javelins, slings, and bows. The shock.
I guess it's kind of like a good reminder that pretty much all the what do you call it? Not games, but aspects, different areas of track and field, all relate back to ancient warfare. The javelin throwing, the shock put, stuff like that. The discus. I don't know what would discus have been in warfare? Do they? I don't know. If you know the equivalent, like, would it be like shield throwing, the Captain America style? Yeah, if you know the answer to that one, let me know in the comments. But yeah, it's a good reminder that the Olympic Games. Yep. All relate back to the original Olympic era style of warfare, I guess. Let's keep going.
Troops of Alexander's army were the companion cavalry, 1,800 elite horsemen, armed with spear and sword, commanded by Philotas, another son of Parmenion. Alexander led the royal squadron in person. There were also 1,800 cavalry from Thessaly, commanded by Callas, 600 from other parts of Greece, led by Erigyeus, and 900 mounted scouts from Thrace and Paeonia, under Cassander. The great Persian Empire was divided into provinces, called satrapies. Each satrapy was ruled by a governor, or satrap. Those in Asia Minor, now threatened by Alexander's invasion, met to discuss strategy. Memnon of Rhodes, a skilled Greek general in Persian service, urged them to avoid battle with Alexander. Instead, he advised them to use a scorched earth strategy, to burn villages and crops and withdraw to the interior. Alexander's army, he promised, would quickly starve. It was good advice, but the satraps were unwilling to lay waste to their own provinces without a fight. So they decided to face Alexander's army at the river Granicus. The Persian army formed up behind the river, which was shallow but 60 feet wide with steep banks. Their front line was a wall of cavalry, about 10,000 horsemen from across the empire. Medes and Hyrcanians from modern Iran, Bactrians from Afghanistan, and Paphlagonians from Turkey's Black Sea coast. Behind, in reserve, were the infantry, several thousand Greek mercenaries, a common sight in Persian armies at this time. These men fought for Persian gold, and were armed with the round shield and short spear of hoplites. The Persians may have been unsure if they could trust these men in combat against fellow Greeks, and so placed them at the rear. Alexander, determined to attack and destroy this Persian force before it could retreat, raced to the Granicus with his best troops. On his left wing he posted Thessalian, Greek and Thracian cavalry under Parmenion's command. In the centre were the massed spears of the phalanx, its 6 divisions commanded by Perdiccas, Koinos, Amintas, Philip, Meleager and Crateros. On the right, Alexander himself with the companion cavalry under Philotas, as well as the elite hypaspists, the Agrianes javelin throwers, and the archers. Alexander, with 13,000 infantry and 5,000 cavalry in all, was probably slightly outnumbered. But ignoring advice to wait until dawn to cross the river, he ordered an immediate assault. He sent a squadron of companion cavalry to ford the river, followed by a regiment of hypaspists and the Paeonian light cavalry. Alexander, calling on his men to show their courage, then led his right wing across the river. As they reached the middle of the river, the Greeks came under a hail of javelins, darts and arrows from the Persian line. Those that made it to the far bank were immediately charged by the Persian cavalry. Alexander was in the thick of the fighting. He attacked where the whole mass of their cavalry and leaders were stationed. Around him, a desperate conflict raged. Horses were jammed against horses, and men against men. The Macedonians striving to drive the Persians away from the riverbank.
I imagine in real life that there were probably more men not on horses in a battle like this. It just seems like it seems like there are too many people still on their horses, either like who fell off their horses or started on the ground, you know, on foot. It just seems like a lot of horses all in one place. But I could be wrong. Maybe that was how battles were fought at this time. Everyone had a horse. Yeah. I guess I forget how common horses were before the invention of the automobile. They were everywhere. So, let's keep going.
The Persians determined to prevent them crossing and to push them back into the river. Alexander's attack seemed reckless, but he was buying time for the rest of his army to cross the river, including the irresistible Macedonian phalanx. Then, suddenly, Alexander was fighting for his life, charged by 2 Persian nobles. Roisaces rode up to Alexander and struck him on the head with his sword, breaking off a piece of his helmet. But the helmet broke the force of the blow, and Alexander struck him down with his lance. Then, from behind, Mithridates raised his sword against the king, but Black Clitus, son of Dropidas, anticipated his blow, struck his arm, and cut it off, sword and all.
Damn. I know there's like, it's probably on the History Channel or something, there's like a show where people take historical weapons from different regions during, I think during the same time period, but like they'll take like a weapon from the Greeks and a weapon from I don't know, like the Japanese versus a weapon from I don't know, the Middle East, and put them all together and like test them against, you know, the fake rib cages and the gelatin kind of thing to simulate a human body, and see what kind of damage they do with a typical blow. And yeah, I'm guessing, you know, it could be, you know, just a tall tale from this battle, but I would imagine the swords probably could chop off a human arm in one like good blow. So yeah, it's intense. It's bloody old war.
Now the Greek army was across the river, and the Persian cavalry faced a wall of Macedonian spears. Most turned and fled.
I heard that Wilhelm scream.
The speed and shock of Alexander's attack meant Persia's Greek mercenaries hadn't even had time to join the battle. Alexander, in a blood rage, or possibly regarding these Greeks as traitors, ignored their appeals for mercy. The mercenaries were surrounded on all sides and massacred. Alexander had won a great victory. Asia Minor now lay at his mercy. But the Persian Empire was still a land of immense wealth and power. Already, it was mobilizing its vast resources to face him. If Alexander was to conquer this empire and take his place in history, he'd next have to face Darius, King of Kings himself. Research and artwork for this video comes from Osprey Publishing's extensive range of books on ancient history. Every Osprey book examines a particular battle, campaign or combat unit in authoritative, meticulous detail. And with more than 3,000 titles, they cover everything from ancient warfare to modern conflict. Visit their website to see their online catalogue. Huge thanks to the YouTube channel Invicta for their help in making this series. You can find out more about the remarkable life of Alexander the Great in their Moments in History series. If you'd like to help us make more history videos, please visit our Patreon page.
All right. Well, maybe I'll check out that YouTube channel. Did you say it was Invicta, I think? Yeah. After this one, you know, I'm sure I'll probably want more detail on Alexander the Great, his life and who he was. Yeah. So maybe I'll give that a watch after this one. So if you want to see that, you know what you gotta do. You gotta like, share, and subscribe. That's right. So please be sure to do that. We always appreciate all the follows that we can get. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed watching. And keep a lookout for the next one. Part 2 should be coming out around the same time as this, maybe a week or so after, you know. But keep an eye out. And until then, I'll see you next time.